Why so good? Flowers help attract pollinators and transfer pollen from sperm-bearing organs of one flower to egg-bearing organs of another. The flower is a short stem bearing modified leaves that attach in concentric circles. If you thought of 4 circles with a circle in each one, the outer layer of the sepals, usually green inside of the petals, the colorful things, stamens of the next layer, the reproductive parts, the male reproductive parts, and pollen grains develop in the anther, a sac at the top of each stamen. Carpels are the female reproductive structure at the center of the flower. It includes the ovary, protective chamber containing one or more ovules. The sticky tip at the top is called the stigma, which traps the pollen. There's the stigma right there. There's the pollen. There's the ovule. There's the petals. Flowers come in many forms. They can have different numbers of petals. They might have them petals, the ovule is above the receptacle. It might be below the receptacle. It might be halfway on the receptacle. All different ways that they classify flowers, all different colors, all different ways that they attract insects or birds or whatever they need for pollination. That's the big deal. They don't just depend on wind pollination like in the gymnosperms. They have other things, and that's why they are so successful. Flowers are an essential element of angiosperm life cycle. Here we have the flower, the pollen hits the hits the stigma. They grow down into the ovule, fertilize the eggs get fertilized, forms a seed. The seed sprouts and grows into a new plant. Very simple life cycle. Big difference is the way that the reproduction occurs in there, but I'll show you that later. Although both have seeds, angiosperms will enclose the seed with an ovary, while the gymnosperms have naked seeds. Fruit is a ripened ovary, helps protect the seed, increases seed dispersal, and is a major food source of animals. Folks, the difference between fruits and vegetables. The fruit is a part of the plant that's been formed from reproduction. It's got seeds in it, even if the seeds are too small, where a vegetable is all the other parts of the plant. You know, a cabbage is not a fruit, it's a vegetable. Okay, a bean is a fruit, it's got seeds in it. So think of that and try to figure out what's your fruit and veggies and stuff like that for you. Wind pollination, dog pollination, animal ingestion. Sometimes seeds have to pass through the intestines of animals before they can germinate. Gymnosperms supply most of our lumber. Angiosperms, nearly all our food, supply fiber, medication, perfume, and decoration. Angiosperms are a unique kind of evolutionary relationship between plants and animals. The exploding human population is extinguishing many plant species at an unprecedented rate, destroying 50 million acres, an area the size of the state of Washington, every year. Humans depend on plants for thousands of products, including food, building materials, medicines. Oh, not the big one. Atropine, a belladonna plant for pupil dilator in your eye exams. Digitaline, foxglove for heart medication. Methyl, ingredient in cough medicines. Morphine, pain reliever. Quinine, malaria preventative. Taxol, Pacific Hue, ovarian drug, cancer drug. Curine tree, muscle relaxant during surgery. Vastablastine, and the common periwinkle for a childhood leukemia drug. This is a coral tree, cool little tree, or Etherinacafora. I took this picture right after a monkey was drinking the water off the leaves in the morning. They grow real big in southern Africa. They also grow in Mexico, and NCIS LA shows them right down the center of lanes, like in the median strip along the water. You see these things every now and then in the shows. Of course, I would recognize them. Probably nobody else really cares. But because I like this plant, I've been trying to grow them for years. They're giant, but I get no flowers. The flowers come up and then the leaves, and they lose everything in the winter. The flowers pop up, then the leaves. This is a protea, the national flower of South Africa. You can also grow them, well, that's the only place in the world they came from. You can grow them in Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, and California. Hawaii has a place in Maui that you can get yourself a dozen or a big bouquet of these things for like $70 delivered on Valentine's Day, which is probably cheaper than getting them from Publix. And these are beautiful. These last forever. You dry them out, and they'll still be there. There's some Proteas. I don't know where I saw them. I guess this was in Africa. I just took pictures of them because they're so much cheaper than here. King Protea. This is a sunflower, Mexican sunflower. The big deal about them, look carefully. You've got white fuzzy things, and then, yellow fuzzy things, and green flat. This is where the florets come out. What florets are you talking about? Here. Here's a cross section of a group of flowers with capitulums. These capitulums have a receptacle on here with a whole bunch of little florets on them. And this is kind of neat because the petals are actual whole flowers, but they don't have male and female parts. The flowers, the reproductive parts, have the female part and the male parts, but no real, well, I guess you could be considered petals, but they're not really. And so you have the mixture of the two on them. Each of these little flowers can form a seed, a sunflower seed. Yes, that's right. Here's another picture I took with my iPhone of them close up. Aloes. We have little ground aloes here, but they got aloes everywhere down there. Jacaranda trees. These are pretty trees. We get them. There's a couple. Used to be a couple in front of the ball at Epcot. They grow over in Bradenton, and every now and then you'll see one in gardens around here as well. Pretoria in South Africa is the jacaranda city because look at all the things. In the springtime they bloom, and boy do they bloom. Look at the petals on the ground there. They're pretty plants. They're native of Brazil. That's the one at Epcot. If they left them there, I'm not sure. They changed the entrance. I haven't been back in a while because it's closed. Anyway, typically, fruits typically consist of a mature ovary. You have soft fruits. The grapefruit, ruby grapefruit, a fleshy fruit with a hard outer layer. Here's a nectarine with a soft outer layer and a hard inner layer. A nut that doesn't even open. This one opens up at maturity. Different ways to carry them around. This is, oh, sorry. I just jumped there. This is a sugar maple. When these things fall off, they come down like a helicopter. So if the wind's blowing, usually when they fall off, it doesn't have to land right under the tree. It can land somewhere else where the seeds can germinate. This is the largest seed that they have, the Coco de Mer, which is from the Seychelles. They get up to about 20 kilograms or 44 pounds. You really don't want to be under the tree when that thing falls on your head. What's wrong with this plant? These are Christmas cactuses, the picture, and they're blooming in July. And this gives you an idea. Another thing the plants have, they have what they call photoperiodism. What does that mean? That they will bloom during certain times when the light is different. For instance, in July in South Africa, where this picture was taken, it's short night. It's like here in the wintertime. It's just like the poinsettias. That's poinsettia in front of my house for Christmas time. But in South Africa, the poinsettias all bloom in their wintertime, which would be May, June, and July. Epcot food things. That's a Japanese maple. Does not grow in Florida. There's some really cool succulents, areas where there's a lot of drought. You plant plants like this. They were selling these at Home Depot, and I found one. It grows pretty good. This plant, I finally got it. I saw this at a nursery, not even in the nursery, in the garden by the nursery. It took me about a year to figure out what it was, and I got it. I bought the bulb for like $29 from a place in Alabama, and it sprouted and got leaves, no flower. Sprouted, got leaves, no flower. This year, in about January, it flowered. It was like unbelievable. So it was a very pretty flower on it. It looks just like that, but it gets pretty big. So don't forget the grasses. They have wind pollination. This is the largest flower in the world. It also smells really bad. It smells like rotting flesh. And of course, who would pollinate rotting flesh? What insects? The flies, that's right. These are arums. These are the largest inflorescence, a very large unbranched inflorescence that grows up like this, and they grow. One of them actually, they had videos of it every day. It was a live camera at Rollins College when it got ready to bloom. This is Namaqualand daisies. This area is pretty much sand, nothing throughout the year. When they get a lot of rain in the wintertime, these daisies sprout, and they have about a 2-week life cycle. The leaves, the seeds germinate, they form the leaves, they form flowers, they form seeds, and after the 2 weeks, the seeds drop into the sand for the next time it might rain a couple of years down the road when it rains real good, and then they all bloom in their springtime. This is Death Valley, believe it or not. If you've ever seen pictures of Death Valley, you know it's pretty dry there. Yet this is a couple of years ago after El Nino had a lot of rain in LA, and Death Valley had its way above normal range for rainfall, and all the flowers in Death Valley decided, we're going to bloom this year. There's a cannonball tree. I guess you don't want to stand under that one. Pretty flowers, though. Any guesses what that flower is? Top should give it away. It's a pineapple. Each of those little purple things is a flower that makes on the bump of the pineapple. The baobab tree, upside down tree, they have a beautiful one that they built in Animal Kingdom on your safari ride, but it looks just like this. I do a comparison between them. I have 2 pictures next to each other, and you can't tell them apart from, away. These are the Kruger Park has the southernmost baobab tree, and then they get going. They work up into northern South Africa into Zimbabwe. You can see the trees, how they stick up above everything else. Anyway, plant diversity. Preserving plant diversity is important in many ecosystems and humans. They're trying to save loss of plant diversity, encourage management practices that use forests as resources without damaging them. A vital chemical elements back into the environment is the fungus, the root associations that they have. They are eukaryotes, typically multicellular, and they split from the animals about 1.5 billion years ago. They come in many shapes and sizes, have more than 100,000 species. Some orange fungus, fairy rings, yeast, mold growing on an orange, chains of microscopic spores. So they're unique in structure, forms in nature. They're important. They get their food by absorption, and the big deal they do is they digest food outside the body with enzymes and absorb the simpler food compounds into them, and this is how they work. They also are very important ecologically to us. The principal decomposers in the ecosystem keep the ecosystem stocked with inorganic nutrients for plant growth. Without decomposers, carbon, nitrogen, and other elements would accumulate in the non-living material and stay there, and we'd run out of it very quickly. Molds, though, can destroy fruit, grain, wood, and human-made materials. The American elm tree, killed by the Dutch elm disease fungus, which killed every elm tree in the United States over the years. That's why there's so many elm streets and no elm trees on Elm Street. Ergot on rye, which is a form of poisoning. LSD is ergot on the rye. It's a fungus that gets on the rye. There was an observation when some young girls in 1692 were accused of being witches. They think that because of the historical facts said that it was a very wet year and warm, which had ergot was thriving there. Records kept the following year, when the witchcraft died down, indicated a dry year. Even though the correlation is consistent with the hypothesis, it's not conclusive. But these girls were not really witches, they were just tripping. Fungus are commercially important. Humans eat them to use them to make medicine like penicillin, decompose waste, produce bread, beer, wine, and cheese. Some other mushrooms. And my video is going to run out in a second, so there's a penicillin and bacteria that can't grow around it. Zone of inhibited growth. That's what Fleming discovered. Here's some lichens, association between fungus and algae. The algae need to live in the water, but the fungus give it a place to live. The algae carry on photosynthesis and give the fungus sugar. So there you go. favorite area of the plants, and the homework is there for you. Take care. Don't forget the quiz next week on the plants, and then there'll be one last lecture on the animals.